In this video, I'm going to compare the Insta360 ONE X with the GoPro Max camera. Which one is best, what should you buy, or should you wait? So let's get straight to it. Neither camera straight out of the box come with anything particular to shout home about. They both come with a battery and they both come with a charge cable, and they both have a soft case of some sort. The neoprene soft case with the ONE X is a snug fit. It's easy to use and it gives a certain level of protection for the camera. In addition to the basics, the GoPro Max does come with two lens protectors and also two lens caps. And the lens protectors are tucked almost secretly away in the pouch that comes with the GoPro Max. We'll talk a bit more about them later. But the one thing that is missing with the GoPro Max is a tripod mount adapter. The ONE X comes with an integrated 1/4" mount at the bottom, which makes it simple to attach to selfie sticks, monopods and tripods and other accessories. But the GoPro Max comes with the standard GoPro fingers that have been newly designed to neatly pack away into the body of the camera. But they've over-engineered what is a simple problem. Why they just didn't put a 1/4" thread at the bottom of the camera, I just don't know. So to attach the GoPro Max to a tripod or a monopod or a selfie stick, you have to use a tripod mount adapter, and when you attach the tripod mount adapter it can swivel, and the last thing you want with a 360 camera is the ability to adjust the angle of the head, because then you'll start to see your selfie stick in shot. The ONE X has a very slim and sleek design. It stands very tall, but as a result straight away feels vulnerable. So you're forever worrying about it falling over, and you constantly have to put it in and out of the neoprene case just to give it that added protection. It's not waterproof or weatherproof to any extent as far as I know. So even with a tiny bit of rain, you have to worry about it getting damaged. The base of the camera, although I haven't had a problem with this myself, has had a lot of criticism from people on the Facebook groups, and a number of ONE X owners have had a problem with the base when they've attached it to a tripod or a monopod, and it's either been twisted or it's pulled out the bottom of the camera, and this part is not user replaceable, so the only way of getting it fixed is by sending it back to Insta360. The GoPro Max has that rubberized GoPro feel about it. It's chunkier, it's solid, it's more rugged, and just feels less vulnerable out of the box. The GoPro Max is also waterproof, so the first day I got it, I purposely went out in the pouring down rain. I had this rebellious feeling. I'd had the Insta360 ONE X for a year, and I'd wrapped it in cotton wool every day, protecting it and caring for it and making sure it didn't get damaged. And then I had this camera that was more robust and I could be a little bit more careless, so I just went out and shot in all like the worst conditions I could go and shoot in. But we should never get blasé about how delicate the lenses are on both of these cameras. They do need to be looked after. For added protection with the GoPro Max, it does come with the two lens protectors that I talked about earlier. These lens protectors are really easy to use and really easy to put on and take off, and to put them on you just push them over the front of the lens. In flatter light they don't affect the image quality that much, but in harsher sunlight you can see more light refractions. The second time I used the lens protector I was a little bit disappointed, because the lens protector had attracted so many microfibers to the front of the lens and dust, and you just couldn't seem to get rid of it easily, and it made the image quality really poor. I still really like the design, but I would only use them in situations when I know that the camera is in real danger of getting damaged. Even though the GoPro Max is waterproof, you can't really get any usable images underwater because of light refractions, and the lens protectors aren't watertight, so they're not designed for filming underwater anyway. We'll have to wait for GoPro to bring out a proper dive housing before we can get some really decent stuff underwater. The only option for weatherproofing and stone chips with the ONE X is the venture case, and the venture case, even though it's very rugged, is quite bulky and does add a lot more to the weight and to the size of the camera, and certainly affects the image quality and the stitch line, especially in direct sunlight. But the other accessory that the ONE X has that the Max simply can't compete with is the dive case, and the dive case is designed for underwater filming and is waterproof down to 30 meters. The ONE X has no touchscreen, as we know, but worse than that, the screen that it does have is very small, and outside it's almost impossible to see. And most of the time, because you can't see the screen, you then have to use your phone and the app. Also, if you want to use manual settings on the ONE X, you have to use your app to change them. And when you use the app, you're then draining the battery on your phone, which depletes quite quickly. So at times it's been a bit of a nightmare, so I always carry around a portable power bank when I'm using the ONE X, just for those times when my phone is getting excessive use with the app. So when I heard that the Max was being released and it had a touch screen, I was really excited and really looking forward to using it. And it didn't disappoint. For 360 filming, This is the best thing about the Max, and it makes the camera a pleasure to use and so much easier. It's so user friendly and simple to access the whole menu on the screen of the camera. You can see what you're recording, you can get an idea of exposure, you can switch between the front and the back camera, you can easily select hero mode, you can play back what you've recorded, you can check the sound is recorded okay when you play it back, and you can manually change the camera settings without using the app. And if you've ever used a GoPro before, then you'll get your hands on the Max and it will just feel familiar. And this is really important for beginners in 360 because it makes the learning curve less steep. Other factors to do with user friendliness include the speed of getting started filming with your camera. It's much easier and quicker to start filming with the One X because of the reasons I mentioned earlier around the mount. With the One X, you just grab your camera, grab your selfie stick, screw it onto the top, and you're ready to go. With the Max, because of the design of the mount, you screw it onto the top of your selfie stick, but you have to make sure it's dead straight. And then if you put it onto a tripod or onto another mount and then back onto the selfie stick, or you move it for whatever reason, you have to constantly check that camera is dead straight on top of the mount, otherwise you will see your selfie stick in shot. In this video I'm not going to compare the specs of the camera, and we're not going to look at the image quality side by side. The camera specs in terms of resolution are pretty much identical. It's not like we're comparing 8K to 5.6 or 5.7 or comparing different sensor sizes. The images you get from both cameras are really nice, and then it just gets subjective. I personally prefer the images I get with the GoPro Max, and I think also that for stills the GoPro Max does produce better images in auto than the One X. I think all GoPro cameras just seem to give you nice colours and better contrast. The Insta360 ONE X with the updated features on their app can now compete more closely with the GoPro Max because they've now introduced Colour Plus, which gives you more vibrant images and greater dynamic range in your shots. It definitely does make the shot look brighter, but I'm not convinced of using the Colour Plus feature every time on every shot. I do like the images of the One X, so I probably won't be using Colour Plus as a matter of course. I will experiment and see what situations Colour Plus does enhance the image rather than detract from it before I just use it. The biggest disadvantage with Colour Plus is that you can't just switch it on and off as a preview. You have to export it before you can see what difference Colour Plus has made, because Colour Plus gets applied in the export process. The same goes with stabilisation with these two cameras. The Insta360 ONE X uses flow state stabilisation and the GoPro Max uses hyper smooth. And the comparison between these two is very subjective because you're comparing two extremely good forms of stabilisation. But if you've done any serious tests between these two cameras regarding stabilisation and you think one is better than the other, then let me know in the comments as to which one you think's best and why. Ever since I've owned the One X, I've always been really impressed with the stitching capability of the camera. This is made more seamless by the fact that it has a very slim body and the fact that the stitching software is incredible. I've never really had any issues with the Insta360 ONE X stitching, even when you're holding it on a short selfie stick or when you've got it mounted close to the surface of an object, such as when you're mounting it on your helmet or when you've got it on a wrist mount or a chest mount or on your handlebars. It's hard to see the stitch line and you get a really nice invisible selfie stick look to all your action shots. Because of the almost seamless stitch line with the One X, the invisible selfie stick shots that was such a big selling point with this camera are really easy to achieve. And for a beginner using this camera, these invisible selfie stick shots are really easy to achieve just from a pure setup point of view, because as mentioned earlier, you just get the One X out and you mount it on top of a selfie stick with a 1/4 inch thread and there are no setup issues. The GoPro Max for a beginner can be set up incorrectly straight away. If the tripod head swivel mount is even slightly out with the GoPro Max, then you'll see the selfie stick in shot. But let's put the mounting issue to one side for one moment. The most challenging part for 360 software to stitch is around the nadir, which is around the base of the tripod. This is particularly hard when the camera is situated close to the surface of something. So when it's on a helmet mount, on a wrist mount, on your handlebars, or close to a patterned floor on a tripod, near your hand, etc. In these situations, the stitching with the Max performs really poorly and it's way off. And it's here where the One X really does come into its own and you realise how good it is in most situations and how tolerant the stitching is. The stitching issues with the GoPro Max are exaggerated even more when you look at the preview on the app. Now I know that you should only be using the app as a preview, but when the preview is that bad, For a beginner in particularly, if they're seeing a really bad stitch line, it doesn't really install you with much confidence about how the stitching is going to appear in the final shot. On the other hand, with the One X, the stitching preview in the app is actually really good, and it's a really good indication of how the final image is going to look. Now, there's no doubt that the GoPro Max has better audio than the One X by a mile. It has 6 microphones and a lot of noise reduction software that makes it cope with even the harshest of weather conditions. I tested it in 37 mph winds when I first went out with the Max, and you can still hear what I'm saying. Even though my voice is slightly muffled because you're fighting against the noise reduction software, it's still pretty clear. This bit across here is particularly windy, so this is a really good test for the camera. So if you can hear me now, I'll be amazed. GoPro have had many years to perfect their microphones and their audio quality, so if you want a 360 camera for vlogging, then at the moment this is the best choice out there. And if vlogging is your thing, then you can easily toggle between 360 mode and hero mode using this button on the touchscreen. But sticking with sound just for the moment and looking now at the One X, the One X has just introduced a new feature on its app called True Audio, and True Audio enhances the voice and reduces background noise. So tonight I'm on my way to a ghost hunt at Shepton Mallet Prison with Southern Ghost Society. It does give you more control over background noise and is a clever feature, but in my opinion it does sound over-processed and a bit unnatural on most examples, and still doesn't compete with the GoPro Max sound. The mobile workflow and the apps on the One X and the Max on the face of it look very similar. On the One X you can shorten your clip, you can add keyframes, and you can change the way that your shot looks and moves. And equally with the Max you can do the same, so you can shorten the clip, you can add keyframes, and you can change the way your shot moves and how it looks on screen. But with the One X you can adjust the speed of your shots, you can create hyperlapses, and you can record at 100 frames a second, so you can do really cool shots like this in bullet time. With the Max there is no option to change the frame rate and record in slow motion. No slow motion, I know, what's that about? I'm sure that this will come in a later update, but who knows. So with the Max you also can't speed shots up using the app. So if you want to create a hyperlapse shot, you have to use GoPro's equivalent of hyperlapse, which is time warp. But with time warp you have to record it as a hyperlapse type shot, and you can't then adjust it back to normal speed later. The interface for the time warp though, which can all be accessed via the touchscreen, is actually really good. On the touchscreen it tells you how long you have to video for, and then how long the final time warp video will be. The One X also has viewfinder mode and the GoPro doesn't. You can select viewfinder mode, you can press record, and then you can reframe your shot by moving the camera around and zooming in and out with your fingers on the screen. With the One X, once you've downloaded your videos or photos to the phone app, it's then really easy to export them to your camera roll on your phone. With the Max you can't transfer 360 photos and videos to your phone, it just won't allow you to do it. I found this really frustrating because with the One X I used to like exporting the equirectangular photo, and then I used to import it into another app and edit it from there. Both cameras allow you to edit multiple clips together using the story features in the GoPro Max or the newly added story features with the One X. In terms of desktop workflow with the One X, you can import your clips into the Studio desktop editor really easily. You can edit them using keyframes, you can reframe the shot, or you can trim the shot and then export it as a 360 video. If you use Premiere, you can download the Insta360 plugin and you can import your files directly into Premiere and start editing them with no conversion needed, which is awesome. Also, when your clips are on your computer, you can see a thumbnail with the Insta360 ONE X clips, and this makes it really easy to locate and organize your clips. With the GoPro Max you don't have any thumbnails. With the GoPro Max I had so many problems with the desktop workflow that my camera and my computer almost went out the window. I cannot tell you how many conflicts, errors and issues I had. It was driving me nuts. Initially I gave up with trying to edit the GoPro Max files in Premiere, and I thought, do you know what, I'm just going to use the desktop editor. 30 seconds later I realised there is no desktop editor with the GoPro Max, so I had to go back and fight all of the issues with Premiere. This is so frustrating because it would make things a lot easier and give you a second option if they had a desktop editor, but I'm hoping that again this will come in the future. So to edit your GoPro Max files in Premiere you need the GoPro Reframe plugin, but you can't import your Max files straight into Premiere. You need to convert them first, and if you've got a Mac you'll use the GoPro Player software, and if you've got a PC like myself, then you'll use the GoPro exporter to convert them. Also, another major consideration with the Max is that once they've gone through the exporting process and you've unpacked the file, that the files are huge. The number of times that I was using the exporter software and it stopped working and I just couldn't figure out why, and then I realised that it was because my hard drive had just run out of storage space. My conclusion for this videos and for these two cameras is very mixed. I'm going to keep the GoPro Max because it's an easy way for me to vlog for the videos that I put up on this channel. I just think using the touchscreen makes the whole process of filming a lot more convenient and so much easier because you don't have to get your phone out to make adjustments to the camera. But then as I start this conclusion, I think, well, if I'm just using the Max for vlogging, then why don't I just go and buy a Hero 8, which has also got superior sound. But then if I buy the 8, then I can't do vlogging shots where I'm using an invisible selfie stick and I'm doing some fancy 360 reframes. But then if I'm doing fancy 360 reframes for vlogging, then my file sizes are going to be huge and the workflow isn't always convenient. I'm going to use more hard disk space, etc, etc. Okay, right, I am going to keep the Max. But what I'm saying is the reasons that I'm going to keep the Max for are not good enough reasons for you to go out and buy one. It's a really exciting time for 360 cameras at the moment, and I actually think that GoPro are late to the game. With the Max, they've brought very little to the table considering how long it's been since they launched their Fusion camera. I think if they brought out the Max a year ago, the same time that Insta360 brought out the ONE X, then I think they'd have given Insta360 a lot of competition, because a lot of the problems we see now with the Max would have been ironed out. They'd have had lots of updates and they would have been on a par probably with where the ONE X is. With the Max, everyone's talking about the touchscreen, but they're not going to be talking about it for very long. The new QCam camera has got a touchscreen. Insta360's next camera will have a touchscreen. Touchscreen will just be what is expected from a 360 camera. Insta360 over the last year have constantly updated their camera's firmware. They've updated their app to give us new features and they've resolved problems. It will be at least weeks and probably months before GoPro resolve the issues they've got with stitching, the issues they've got with workflow, to increase their frame rates and to even come close to matching what the ONE X can offer already. By the time GoPro catches up and addresses all these problems, we'll be comparing it to a newer Insta360 camera, and I think by that time there'll just be no comparison. It's just going to look so dated. If you're desperate to buy a 360 camera now and you buy the Max, then you'll have a very user-friendly and a very robust camera, but you must be prepared to be patient for several weeks or several months before you can get the most out of the camera, before all the issues are resolved. If you want to buy the ONE X now, then you must always be careful with it and constantly protect it and wrap it in cotton wool. But in return, it will provide you with nicely stitched images, a complete and smooth workflow, and just less frustration. So I'm definitely keeping the Insta360 ONE X and I'm keeping the GoPro Max for the moment, but I would suggest that you sit tight, wait to see what happens with Insta360's next camera, wait for some reviews on the QCam camera, and wait to see what else is launched between now and then and make a decision in the new year. I hope you found this comparison useful. Please let me know in the comments what you've decided to do. My name is Rich from Eat Sleep 360. Please remember to subscribe for weekly 360 hints, tips, tutorials and reviews, and I'll see you on the next video.